Hey, so we have a new moon solar eclipse happening on September 21st. And this feels like we're supposed to be further along than we are in a way, but we are so close. We have been completing a chapter of our life that we tried to complete many years ago. Didn't quite get there, but this is the time we are where we are actually seeing it clearly and we are able to align ourselves internally to that clarity and actually just allow life to unfold from that instead of being so controlling about it as I think we have tried to be, um, taking action based on the the way that society has told us to over the last our whole lives basically. And I think for many people this is the return of focus. This is the return of using your attention through your own will, through your own decision. And that brings with it a lot of responsibility, but it also brings with it an equal amount of freedom. I recently heard this idea that it's not that with freedom comes responsibility, but rather with responsibility comes freedom. So by taking responsibility for purely your attention, which is a Virgo thing, and that's this Virgo new moon, taking responsibility for your attention and knowing that what you do, what you look at, where you lay your eyes, where you lay your fingers, what you're pointing to, what you give your life force to, what your image, how it shows up, you know. It's not to get hypervigilant about it, but just to understand that that's your currency. That's what you're exchanging with the world and with this new moon in Virgo ruled by Mercury in Libra, which is all about the exchange of balance, communicating balance in your life. Kind of means we have been out of balance and that we are bringing ourselves into balance through conversation, through communication with other people. And the interesting thing is we have a mutual reception because this Mercury in Virgo is ruled by Mercury in Libra is ruled by Venus in Virgo, and then Venus in Virgo is ruled by Mercury in Libra, and they kind of just keep going back and forth like that. So there's a very important interplay here between how you communicate with other people to bring more balance into your life, how you're communicating to yourself about what's actually honest and what's true for you, and then how that allows you to be open to other people's attention, right? Venus is where we are open and where you let things into your life, where you are naturally open. And right now with Venus in Virgo, we are naturally open to attention. We are open to focus. That's the core of Virgo as I see it. And it just goes right back to that same new moon theme of we're taking responsibility for our attention. This whole idea of the attention economy, not just in social media, but when it comes to education and when it comes to big corporations, right? Like, what are you actually marketing to? Are you marketing, do you want people's money or do you need their attention? Do you need their literal eyeballs, right? So that's what's up at this new moon. That's what's restarting in a really big way. But there are so many layers going on here, and it would be way too long to go into everything. I'll probably make some longer videos about some of these topics that I'll go into now, but to just name a few, right? The one on my mind, the absolute most, is the fact that Venus is in Virgo, but at the time of this new moon, she hasn't crossed the South Node yet. So the South Node is basically where the past is present, which means when a planet gets close to the South Node, that means that planet is completing a relationship to the past. As that planet reaches closer and closer to the South Node, we can feel like something is something really big is finishing, or we are finally connecting to a part of the past that we disowned. We are finally reconnecting to a part of us and seeing it very clearly so that we can let go of it. I don't read the South Node as simply a place of letting go or a place of like, I think it's simply where the past is present because there's something for you to do with the past. And in Virgo, this is a past practice of your attention, okay? So this has been really important, and for a long time the ruler of Virgo has been in Leo. So this is the past creative practice that you've been attending to, and it's probably the case that now you're working on your creative practice because it's time. Like I had this whole thing because we had Jupiter in Pisces in 2021 into 2022 a little bit, but then in 2022, at the end of 2022, or it was more like 2023, Saturn came in. So Jupiter going into Pisces, early 2020s, we really expanded our belief in God, and whatever that means to you, whether that's like the woo world or the religious world or just the creative world, right? That's all Pisces, which is the opposite of Virgo. So if Virgo is attention, Pisces is the thing you're putting your attention on. It's the God. It's the limitless thing that all you can do is just chop wood and carry water to honor, right? God doesn't actually need you to be anything or do anything. God just needs you to pay attention and give your energy in that direction. But the thing is, we're not God, right? We have to be specific about our lives. Even if you just want to be an aesthetic and meditate, you're focusing your attention. The whole thing is about focusing your attention. And that's Virgo, which is opposite to Pisces. So that is where the nodes are. And I think that this time, because all these planets are crossing the South Node, it's Virgo season. And in the time before this eclipse, the Sun and Mercury passed the South Node, which was very powerful. So I think we're already feeling like we have completed a chapter with the past. We met the past in a very important way when it comes to our attention, specifically when it comes to our practice of connecting to God. But I think the reason we had to go back so much in the first place is because Saturn came into Pisces in like 2023 and started like crushing our dreams, crushing all of the expansion that Jupiter gave us over the 2021 and 2022 time. And the crushing of Saturn wasn't because we did anything wrong. It was just because we needed to be in charge of our own capacity to hold limitlessness, right? We needed to know our own boundarylessness, but also learn what boundaries were necessary when we do step into these worlds, right? These worlds of expansion, spirituality, creativity, unity, consciousness itself, So Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, and Neptune has also been in Pisces, but Neptune stepped into Aries in the last few months, and so we've been really released from a lot of the shutdown, a lot of the contraction that happened in 2023, 2024 even, all the contraction that happened, So, but Saturn's back in Pisces now at the time of this eclipse, and it's opposing this eclipse directly. But I actually read this very nicely because I think what this is saying is we've done so much work to go back to that past practice in Virgo, which I think was like a boot camp. It was like a training period for us to expand our capacity to hold Pisces, to hold the limitlessness of reality, which I don't think we had a few years ago. We have really trained our attention in this time. We've trained our purpose. We've trained the specific actions, and we've let go of the ones that aren't actually helpful, the ones that are just busy work, but we've returned to the ones that are honest and are kind of a pure devotional truth. And so much of this has to do with our creative practice. We had that Mercury retrograde in Leo, but it is at 29 degrees And this is the last eclipse before we have, in 6 months, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which totally begins a brand new era. But this eclipse kind of heralds the beginning of this next 6-month period where things are dissolving more and more than ever, with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction getting, we're just down to the last few months here. This is a 36-year cycle that's coming to an end. This eclipse is really, I would say, well aspected in most regards, apart from the Mars-Pluto square. But I would say that Mars-Pluto square is pushing us to not stay in the old anymore. I like it. There's so much about this eclipse that I really, really, really like, between the fact that the eclipse is forming basically a grand trine with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini. This is just opportunity after opportunity, and these are specifically social opportunities to be with other people, opportunities to be in new communities that you've been trying, again, to get into. Mercury's rulership extends, in Virgo, which is very close to the South Node. Just there's so much to do with the past and completing the past, but we're not there yet. I think we've all done a lot of work to try to close an old chapter of our lives. I think it's even been since 2020. But I don't think we're going to get there till April of 2026, at least astrologically speaking. So these next 6+ months, we see it, I think, more clearly than ever. I do think this lunar cycle is very cool because we'll see Venus cross the South Node on October 4th, which I think we will have a very visceral feeling of actually moving on from something when that happens. I don't think this eclipse itself will, we don't have everything together just quite yet. Okay, when Venus crosses the South Node on October 4th, we are really going to be feeling like we completed something, because there isn't any other planet that's going to be crossing the South Node until Jupiter crosses the South Node, but that's going to be next summer. And at that point, we're going to be so focused on the North Node. Pluto's going to be up there with the North Node. We're going to be in a whole nother timeline by next summer. But there's something about now, the end of September, and the next 6 months that's about closing up this chapter. We have the Aries full moon that happens just days after Venus crosses the South Node. And again, this is super relational, super much about knowing who you are, knowing who other people are with clarity that I don't think we've had in a really long time. It's Venus, after all, crossing the South Node. And there's just a return to a coherence or a clarity from the past that I think we disowned it. I do think that we disowned it. I think it became too much. I think the Pisces stuff got way too big in 2020, from 2022 to around 2024. The Pisces stuff got too big. The Pisces stuff got shut down, actually, quite literally. The dream started to dissolve itself under the weight of, I don't know what, reality, or the fact that it was just time itself for the dream to close. There's two more things I want to say. The first is that we are in this 500-year-long cycle that I haven't talked about at all, because I've only kind of recently clocked into it. And then, what's the point of astrology at all? Okay, so Pluto-Neptune cycle. Pluto is the deepest motivation for the collective and for individuals. And Neptune is if you've heard of Maya, if you've heard of just limitless possibility, it's consciousness itself. So basically the relationship between Neptune and Pluto is very much so about how we play with our desires and how we see them as even possible to be created in this life, right? Neptune isn't about necessarily making the dream come true. Neptune's just about seeing the dream contrasted with, complete lack of being in a dream. Neptune are both of these extremes. And then Pluto is that very specific core desire that is a soul level thing that's not limited to this lifetime, but it is the reason we incarnate. And so the relationship again between Neptune and Pluto is that of like really long term, first of all, like focusing for ourselves and almost studying how we can even imagine our desires as becoming possible. You know, all of the ways, you know, the last conjunction between Neptune and Pluto happened in Gemini in like 1851 or something. And that to me speaks to that core intention of Pluto and Neptune, Neptune being capital T, unknowable truth, or the Tao, and then Pluto being desire itself on the most deepest fundamental level. So these two together, conjunct in Gemini, seeded a 500-year cycle of exploring desire and possibility of the mind, and that's it. And our lifetime, as I'm saying, is only going to see this sextile, which is the first 60 degrees between these two planets, which astrologically speaking, that first sextile is actually a very internal phase. We've already done a lot of exploring of what the possibilities are, but in this phase is where we say, oh, I actually kind of know what my dream is and what my desire is, studying all the possibilities. And it is internal. It is kind of internal. I'm not saying everyone has to be internal, but I'm saying this largest relational backdrop astrologically, which lasts 500 years. We're only 150 years into it. We're in a phase of this cycle. It's an internal phase. So, you know, I have gotten kind of weird about this Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's coming up because it feels apocalyptic right now, okay? That dissolving, that end phase, the balsamic phase between Saturn, which is hard knock reality, and Neptune, which is the dream. So that relationship between Saturn and Neptune astrologically is about making our dreams come true, and also about making totally like non-dream realities also come true. It's about the complete like ending of like reality, like hard touchable reality as you know it. It feels apocalyptic because it does feel like structural reality is ending, right? That's just what it feels like. No one's content. Everyone is trying to shatter reality, whether that's spiritually, politically, you know, spiritually, like I don't know. There's a lot of non-duality. There's a lot of people not wanting other people to exist. Like, I'm not saying everything's going to be perfect in 6 months, but I'm saying we are at a point of great closure, and that can feel really disheartening. Like, why would you want to try to start or continue rather anything at all right now? But my point with this 500-year cycle between Pluto and Neptune is that we are part of something so much greater on a level of consciousness, and that's what these planets speak to. So I just wanted to offer that and put that into context at this time because it can feel like a lot is ending. It's a 29-degree Virgo new moon, and I do think that in 6 months we will feel some type of culmination, not just because, you know, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will happen and we will start to rebuild our dreams in February, the end of February into March of 2026, but also because we'll have a Virgo full moon eclipse around that time period too, which that full moon in Virgo is kind of like the culmination of this new moon in Virgo. So this is well beyond a normal lunar cycle. Absolutely. We are in eclipse season, and we are in a very powerful moment of cyclical astrological times. And, you know, the irony is it all comes down to you and how you're talking to yourself. Very Mercury ruled eclipse, but it's also about where you're putting your attention and just really very deeply realizing that devoting yourself to whatever God is to you, devoting yourself to the largest, most expansive love that you've ever been able to touch or connect to, and then to realize that even that is limited. But there's this tricky thing, which is that because of all this Virgo energy, you have to create a ritual in order to do that. You have to decide, you have to point to it. Okay, Virgo is very dexterous, it's very specific, very discerning. So this isn't a time to just be completely like, haha. I do think it's a time to say anything goes and to trust and to not overwork yourself, but it is a time to take responsibility, Saturn, of where you're putting your energy, where you're putting, like, I keep thinking of like your eyes and your fingers and like, what are you pointing at? What are you looking at? Because that's creating your reality. And I don't mean that in a woo way. I mean that from like a habit way. Like what you're looking at every day creates who you are. That's a habit. Virgo is habits, and it gets its bad rap because you can get yourself into a lot of bad habits that try to connect you to God, like drinking and drugs, abuse, and guilt, even feeling guilty about something as though there is a larger moral framework that you either did or did not miss the mark in trying to reach. You know what I mean? These are conceptions of our world and religion that like a lot of people have to work through, but that's not reality. It's not real. You choose who you are in every single moment. I do think we have like a blueprint, but I also think that we are so not limited by astrology and our charts. Astrology is kind of like the last frontier. That sounds gross of me to say, but it's kind of like nature. And it's not for us to like desire to master in the way like of weird power dynamics, but it is for us to realize that there's a part of us in our soul that's not from Earth's nature, right? Like there's a part of our soul that is from everywhere beyond and anything you can ever imagine, which means there's a part of us that is not bound by the planets, that is not an expression of nature, and will not always be following the same fractal pattern as our chart will indicate that it does, and that is happening all the time. Do you see kind of what I'm pointing at here? Like we are so beyond, and that's free will, but our chart does show us a very clear map of how we're naturally, organically expressing. And I think the last thing I'll say is that you should work on your strengths, not your weaknesses. Train what you're already good at. That's what you're trying to do. Train what you already love, train what you are already good at, and devote yourself to that. And then that will help all of the other things that you feel less good at. You can figure out ways to make that better. You choose to train what you are good at, and everything else will be carried up with that. Again, it's just about being clear about who you are, what you want to focus on, and do not second guess who you are. Do not second guess what you're interested in. You do it. You are it. I think that's what I have. I initially wanted to make this video a lot more structured. It wasn't happening. So I appreciate you if you're still watching till the end. Let me know how you're feeling about it all. Take it easy. I really think Virgo is an incredibly enjoyable energy because it's kind of like the flow state. It's kind of like if you like playing sports and you just love it because you know where you need to kick the ball, you know where you need to run, and you're working towards a larger like literal goal, right? And that's not something you're doing alone. You're with other people, right? The other thing at this time is it's so social. We have the grand trine, right? All these planets are about to move into Libra, Sun, everything else eventually, and that's that grand trine at the beginning of the air signs. And so this is all about how one-on-one connections help us move into more aligned group scenarios, which those groups with Uranus and Gemini are literally having us liberate our minds, which is Uranus and Gemini. And so we're speaking new languages, we're using words and data in just totally revolutionary ways, and that's where we change our minds, we change the data that we are working with, then changes who we are, changes our habits, ultimately changes our relationship with God. But I do think at this time it's quite simple, right? We are being very conscious of what we look at, what we point to, what we make, what we show, and that's setting us up for a very powerful next month. So yeah, that's what I have, my friends. Have a lovely, lovely new moon, and I will be back with some more thoughts, absolutely, in some time. So yeah, that's all. Bye.